Hi, my name is Christine Crum, and I am your host for ICAN. ICAN is a show dedicated to providing information to anyone who needs help. Help with what? Help with getting answers on where to go to get help with drug misuse, helping veterans find where they can go to get help, homelessness, and more. Once a month on this channel, we will take an hour to discover just what is really going on in our community. We will have interviews of people who can help and people who need help. We will discover all the stats, figures, and truth or fiction about drug, alcohol, and cigarettes. This is a program for not just adults, but kids too. We are all a part of this community, and we are all in this together. Welcome to ICAN, because I can make a difference, and so can you.
Open our hearts, free every soul. The fear inside, you must let it go. Oh, that monster, before it conquers you. Yeah, we all have demons, we fight every day. You get knocked down, but the bell hasn't rang, so keep going. Just stay focused when life seems hopeless. Before life passes you by, you must, like a bird with broken wings always. You've gotta reach for the stars. It might seem far. Ooh, don't stop. You gotta try. Oh, 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 you gotta try. Never stop dreaming, even away. Nothing can stop you from winning this race, so keep going. Just stay focused. Yeah, I am the tiger, I own the prize. Every storm is with the rainbow in the sky. You are golden. If no one else notices, don't stop, keep going. Before life passes you by, you must, like a bird with broken wings always. You gotta reach for the stars. It might seem far. Ooh, don't stop. You gotta try. Oh, 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 you gotta try. You gotta try. All you got to do is try. Oh, you gotta 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 try. You gotta try. All you got to do is try. You gotta try.
I think the biggest piece of advice I have for someone going through addiction or thinking about going to rehab is being honest with yourself. Don't be afraid to get help. I think that's the biggest stigma that we're trying to erase is don't be afraid to ask for help.
Alcohol use and misuse. There are a lot of stereotypes and stigma surrounding alcohol that prevent both understanding and adequate care. And the spectrum of symptoms in an alcohol use disorder can include is a lot more complicated than you might think. Check out this video.
Alcohol problems are no joke. Excessive drinking can have a wide range of consequences, and it can lead to other diseases like liver disease, heart disease, and cancer. It's also incredibly common and seriously undertreated, affecting millions of people worldwide. And to make matters more complicated, there are a lot of stereotypes and stigmas surrounding alcohol that prevent both understanding and adequate care. For one thing, though we usually refer to alcohol abuse or alcoholism, psychiatrists and other medical professionals now formally use the term alcohol use disorder, or AUD. That's because previous definitions didn't totally capture the spectrum of symptoms that AUD can include. But also, the way we think about treatments doesn't always represent the full story. Here in the United States, common treatments include rehab and those anonymized 12-step group therapy programs, but those are far from the only treatments for alcohol use disorder, nor are they necessarily the most effective. What many people don't realize is that there are so many ways to treat AUD. So many, in fact, that doctors and patients have choices when it comes to treatment and recovery. It's not all about checking into rehab or starting a 12-step program. There's tons of stuff. So here are some of the ways that we can treat AUD. The term alcohol use disorder officially comes from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or DSM, the manual psychiatrists use to diagnose mental illnesses. The 5th edition of the DSM lists 11 criteria for AUD, including having cravings for alcohol, continuing to drink even though you suspect it might be causing problems, and actually having job or life problems caused by drinking. But patients don't have to check all 11 boxes. If they meet at least 2 criteria, medical professionals may diagnose them with mild AUD, and if they meet more than 2, doctors may bump that diagnosis up to moderate or severe. Before we talk about what's involved with AUD treatments, though, we should establish what doctors actually want as a result of that treatment, the outcomes, to use the medical jargon. Most of the time, the treatment goal is abstinence, for patients to stop drinking entirely. But that's not always the case, and in some circumstances, it may be appropriate to try and shoot for more moderate, controlled drinking habits. That can come up when patients don't want to or don't think they can stop drinking completely, because ultimately, it's more important to engage these folks in treatment, even if it means compromising. Like anything else, it's something to be figured out between a patient and their doctor. But regardless of what the goal is, there's a wide range of behavioral treatment programs that can be applied to alcohol use disorder. At least in the US, the most well-recognized are probably those 12-step programs. One example is Alcoholics Anonymous, but there are others, some based on religious or spiritual beliefs, and others that are more secular. Either way, doctors refer to such programs as 12-step facilitation. But despite the number of people who go through these programs, there's not actually much evidence about how well they work because these things are really hard to study. Scientists have looked at them, but their research often examines such a range of outcomes that it's hard to compare one paper to another. Also, the programs are anonymous, and it's kinda hard to recruit study participants when you don't know who they are. One 2006 review sorted through the literature about these programs, and it actually suggested that none of the studies out there provided convincing evidence in favor of the 12-step approach. The most encouraging thing they could offer was one study which did find some indication that AA might help get patients into treatment and keep them there. That doesn't mean these programs are bad, though, just that the research is a bit fuzzy. Outside of studies, many patients have reported that the support provided by group therapy is helpful, so many doctors keep 12-step programs on the table. Now, treatments like this aren't the only kind of behavioral intervention. Behavioral interventions can cover all kinds of things, from a brief meeting with a primary care doctor to residential rehab programs. But unfortunately, the story surrounding them is the same. It's really hard to study for various reasons, so there's not much clear evidence about whether or not they work. Groups like the World Health Organization keep recommending them, though, because they provide psychological and social support, which is definitely something. So if these programs work for people, they are definitely worth it. Regardless, there are forms of behavioral treatment that that do have some pretty good evidence that back them up. Cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, is a form of therapy that focuses on helping people identify and change unhelpful thoughts and behaviors. It's been shown to be effective for substance abuse time and time again in the medical literature, and patients respond well to it. Brief interventions are also highly effective for alcohol use, maybe surprisingly. These are exactly what they sound like: short, one-off meetings with patients for as little as 5 minutes. Studies have shown that even such a minimal treatment can decrease heavy drinking 20 to 30% and have measurable benefits up to 2 years down the line. They're targeted to people whose behavior represents a risk of developing alcohol problems rather than those who already have some form of dependence, which might help explain why a short conversation can be so effective. Because of their one-off nature, brief interventions are a way to reach people who show up to a hospital or their doctor's office for whatever reason, so doctors consider them the first line of treatment. But while therapy in all its various forms can really help people, it's also not the only option. In the US, there are a handful of drugs that are approved to treat alcohol use disorder, including naltrexone, disulfiram, and acamprosate. Naltrexone is available in both pill and injectable forms, and it was originally designed to treat opioid dependence. But it also helps treat alcohol dependence, probably by decreasing the amount of dopamine released in the brain in response to alcohol. Since dopamine is associated with a pleasant, rewarding feeling, naltrexone makes it feel less rewarding to drink. Multiple studies have shown that naltrexone reduces both a return to binge drinking and a return to any drinking in patients who have quit alcohol, though the size of the effect isn't as big as doctors might like. AUD isn't just about the cravings, though. Chronic alcohol use and dependence also produce a host of changes in the brain, and acamprosate aims to change them back. For example, alcohol can mess with the signaling done by the neurotransmitter NMDA, which is involved in learning and memory. Acamprosate helps modulate that signaling so it can help patients maintain abstinence from alcohol. Studies show it helps people avoid taking up drinking again, although it doesn't prevent a return to binge drinking in particular, which is defined as having more than 4 or 5 drinks in a day. Finally, disulfiram is a bit different. It's been approved for decades, ever since the 1940s, and instead of your brain, it works in your liver. It blocks aldehyde dehydrogenase, one of the enzymes responsible for breaking down alcohol. And if that sounds bad, it is. It's bad on purpose. When aldehyde dehydrogenase doesn't work properly, it leads to a buildup of a chemical called acetaldehyde in the body. And that leads to flushing, nausea, vomiting, palpitations, and occasionally worse symptoms like heart problems, though it's not clear how common those are. Basically, if you're taking this medication and you drink alcohol, you will get sick, and it will not be nice. The idea is that people will quickly learn to avoid the adverse reaction. Unfortunately, when study patients aren't told whether they're getting a disulfiram or a placebo, it doesn't seem to make much difference to their alcohol use, although there is evidence to suggest it's more effective when used under a doctor's supervision than without. Of course, these are just drugs used in the US. The European Union has also approved a drug called nalmefene to help people with alcohol dependence drink less. It works quite a bit like naltrexone, and it can reduce the number of days that people binge drink compared to a placebo. And in the US, some drugs for other conditions can also be used to treat AUD, like gabapentin, which is used for seizures, but more studies are needed to determine their effectiveness. All in all, there are a lot of safe, potentially effective drug options out there, but alarmingly, researchers have estimated that only 9% of people who could stand to benefit from them are actually getting them. Plenty of people receive behavioral treatments, but it seems like a lot more people could be getting these drugs. There are likely a number of reasons for that, but it's also worth keeping in mind that there's no rule that says you have to pick just one of these things. Medicine and behavioral intervention together has also been shown to be effective, like in the 2006 COMBINE study. This was a randomized controlled study of almost 1,400 patients that explored several questions about the relationship between drug and behavioral therapy for alcohol use. The researchers wanted to know things like whether drugs can be effective independently of treatment by a specialist, and whether specialist treatment could be improved by adding drugs. drugs. They looked at how many days patients went without drinking, as well as how long it took patients to have a day where they drank heavily after beginning treatment. And they tested both naltrexone and acamprosate. Most groups received what the researchers called medical management, a basic 9-session treatment designed to be administered by a primary care doctor. But some also received more specialized counseling referred to as combined behavioral intervention. People in all treatment conditions showed improvement, which is great. You don't want to see your study population get worse if you can help it. Patients taking naltrexone, receiving a behavioral intervention, or both all fared better than patients receiving a placebo or medical management alone. However, the combination of naltrexone and therapy didn't fare any better than either treatment by itself. The authors suggest this could actually be beneficial for some patients. If they didn't have access to therapy, seeing a primary care doctor and receiving naltrexone could still help them. And this really drives home the idea that doctors want to see people get better. The goal isn't to promote one treatment over another, it's to get people into any treatment at all. In fact, some researchers have suggested that informing patients of all of the options could give them more independence and control over their own treatments, and that could help tear down the stigma against seeking help in the first place. This episode of SciShow is brought to you by our patrons on Patreon. Having people support this show means that we can tackle complicated topics like this. We really appreciate everybody who's able to support us, whether you started this month or you've been doing it for years. If you want to see some of the perks that are available or just help us make good science content on the internet, check out patreon.com/scishow.
Welcome everyone to ICAN. Today's show will be about alcohol abuse and how it affects not just the person but also the family. This show is a very personal one to me as I am a child of an alcoholic family. My father was a very abusive alcoholic, especially towards my mother and brother. He wasn't very abusive to me as I had a lot of health issues growing up, but I had to watch and hear the things going on, so I was just involved. I was so messed up I felt guilty for not getting beat up. Our world revolves around my father's drinking. Back then, if the police were called in because he was the man of the house, he didn't have to leave, we did. So we spent a lot of time at our grandparents' houses. We could never bring friends home or go to friends because we never knew what condition anything would be in. So I withdrew into books, into writing and art, but I found solace there. Unfortunately, when I grew up and moved away, I could no longer remember any of my childhood. When I finally went to counseling, I asked my counselor why I couldn't remember my childhood. And she said, because the brain blocks out the bad parts. It protects you. Unfortunately for my brother, he became an alcoholic, a very bad alcoholic. Alcoholism is an illness and should be treated as such. I rarely, if ever, drink. And the sad part of the world today is that alcohol plays such a big part of everything. There are very few places you can go that don't involve alcohol in some way. Anyways, please welcome Patricia Howard, mental health and AODA psychotherapist. And afterwards, we will talk to Emily Reich about a program called Sober Bowling. Welcome back. Patricia, can you tell us a little bit about yourself first?
Sure. I am a therapist. I work with mental health and I work with addictions. And I come from a family of people who are actively using substances or alcohol, or some of them are in recovery from substances or alcohol.
Okay. Now you said you're a psychotherapist. What does that do? What do you do as a psychotherapist?
Okay, so you do counseling.
Okay.
I'm currently working in individual therapy, which means it's just one-on-one. We sit and talk for an hour, kind of like what you see on TV, you know. Mm-hmm. But I've also worked in other levels of care where it's been like a residential treatment center or an intensive outpatient group therapy. But right now I'm doing individual therapy here in Watertown.
Okay. Why do some people react differently to alcohol than others?
So a little bit of it is genetics.
Okay.
Some of it is like youth. we have to process alcohol through our liver. And the more we process alcohol through the liver, which is really hard for our liver to do, the more damage our liver gets. And so as we get older, we don't process it through as well.
Okay.
And so some people who might be able to sober up, you know, after a couple of drinks after a game and then be fine, another person might still have that alcohol content hours and hours later because it hasn't been able to be processed.
Okay, now you say it's genetics to a certain extent. Now in a family, like my brother became an alcoholic, my mother was an alcoholic, my father, my grandfather, but I'm not.
Yeah.
How? I mean,
Right. So we do a lot of research into addictions, and we're like, is it genetic? Is it what we learn from other people? Alcohol is one of the only things to date in my research or my study of research, that we can see a spot on the gene. It's called an allele. And so there is a little thing that does kind of, in our genetics, that does predispose us for what we call alcoholism, or we call alcohol use disorder. But also another big piece of it is that when we're babies, our job is to pick up on micro cues so we can learn things like how to walk and how to talk. Well, we pick up on micro cues about how to cope with life too, and how to celebrate life, and what to do. And if the people around us are drinking, we learn that very easily. So is it more genetics or more how we're nurtured? It's a combination. And then there's some populations, for example, Native Alaskans and Native Americans, it just seems to be, for some reason we're not exactly sure of, a bigger struggle.
okay, and is it higher for men or women, or is it just about the same?
I have not seen anything telling me it's different for men or women.
What is a standard drink?
Yeah, good question. So
You gave them to me.
I gave you the questions. All that matters is that how much alcohol is in it. So about 1 can of beer, which is 12 ounces, or 1 cup of wine, which is maybe 5 or 6 ounces, or 1 shot, which is like of liquor, which is like 1.5 ounces. So all of those contain about the same amount of alcohol. Your body doesn't care how it got there. It doesn't care if it was 1 can of beer or 1 shot. It's just still about a drink.
Okay. I know in college a lot of binge drinking goes on, and
Yeah.
Why do you think that is such a hot thing in college?
Well, that's a really good question. So it might be some people's first taste of freedom and independence. College ages 20, 21, 22. The back part of the brain, the impulsive part, is fully functioning when you're 20, but the front part, the thinking part, your prefrontal cortex is still developing until you're about 27. And so you go out into the world to be an adult without being fully equipped. You're very good at being impulsive and having fun. Good for you. But it takes a few more years to get really good at making decisions.
Now, my father was a complete alcoholic his whole life,
Okay.
and it affected us kids. And how does it affect the family?
Yeah. Well, so you've been through a lot.
Yeah.
I have compassion for you. It absolutely affects the whole family. It can be as severe as people end up doing jail time for OWIs or other bad decisions. It can be like this, I hate the term functioning alcoholic. My dad would be called a functioning alcoholic. He was a farmer in Idaho. We had a potato farm. But to support his farming habit, he worked nights at a bowling alley. And I grew to realize that I had never seen him actually sober. And I say this with respect. You know, he just always had a can of beer. And how did that affect me? Our family events were at the bowling alley, but he never saw a track meet or a basketball game or attended any of my functions. So was he functioning? Well, he earned a living, you know, and he was happy. But I would have wanted more from him than that if we had been able to get the help.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Does that ring true for you?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was awful.
Awful. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Is it okay to drink when you're young, pregnant?
Okay. So yeah, don't do it when you're young because it's not legal until you're 21. You're still growing, you're still developing your organs in your brain. When you're pregnant, no, never. That's just not good for the fetus. When you're pregnant, the placenta blocks some harmful things from getting to the baby, but it does not block alcohol. So the baby will get the alcohol. You just don't want to do that.
And they end up with fetal alcohol syndrome.
Fetal alcohol syndrome, which is a sad preventable thing.
Can you describe some of the can't think of the word. Some of the things that you can tell that the child has fetal alcohol syndrome?
Well, you can tell by the look. So they're going to have a flat bridge on their nose. It looks a little bit different around their lip. This little dent isn't there. Sometimes you can see a little bit of difference in the ears. And so genetically, it's kind of changing the way they look. But the most difficult part for an infant born with fetal alcohol syndrome is it just changes their intelligence. Their intelligence. They'll struggle more in school. We see a lot of behavior problems, and we don't know if that's because of the fetal alcohol syndrome or just the little bit different look that you have, and then the lower intelligence that you have to deal with all your life.
And do you think they are more likely to drink also?
That's a good question, and what I would do is research that. If you were my patient and asked me that today, I'd research that and get back with you. I've not seen anything that they're more likely. However, if they're in that home, yes. And then if there's that little genetic piece, even if they're being raised in a different home, that little genetic piece might add to it. There's 4 of us siblings, and I'm the one who doesn't drink. And they think I'm odd. They call me the white sheep of the family as an insult.
Yeah.
As an insult.
I know what you mean.
You've been there. So.
Yeah. And that's the hard part, because alcohol is so much a part of our society.
Yes.
You can't go anywhere where alcohol is not involved.
Yeah.
And that makes it so much harder for an alcoholic.
It is. So for me, I can go to Summerfest or I can go anywhere and I'm not tempted to drink because I don't drink. Fun fact, I've never had one complete drink in my life. When I was 10, I took little sips out of my parents' cups that were sitting around the house just because I was curious, but I've never had a complete drink in my life. But if you're a recovering person, you need to stay away from the people, places, and things that will trigger you. And that makes it a lot more difficult. But there's ways you can do it. So say if fishing always included having a beer, but you still want to fish, but you don't want to have a beer, then you have a soda in your hand, right? So there's, and I help people learn ways to cope. But let's say that you were a barber and you cut hair for 20 years and you retire, you're still going to think about cutting hair now and then. So it's going to stick with you, but you can still manage it.
What are signs of alcohol use in adolescence?
Well, we'll see a drastic change in behavior and grades. That's the biggest one. They don't feel good in the mornings. They have a hangover, the sleeping. If your nose is used to it, you can smell alcohol on people the next day because it comes out your pores, your sweat.
Yeah, I remember
However,
that smell.
You remember, and it's not good, and it's different than fresh alcohol right after they drink, yeah. But if the parents are also consuming alcohol, they're not going to notice that smell. But the smell, the change in behavior, the change in friends, the breaking curfew, grades dropping, just as a sudden change.
Do you have to hit rock bottom to recover?
It's one of my favorite questions. You do not. You need to hit a change point, but you don't have to hit rock bottom. That's a fallacy. And some family members sit around waiting. Well, as soon as he hits rock bottom, he or she is going to change. And no, but you have to reach a change point. You have to have a reason why, and then you are your own agent. You're your own change agent.
So the next question I would guess would kind of follow that. If I've been a problem drinker, will I always have an alcohol problem?
You will always be a person in grateful recovery if you've had any substances, alcohol or anything, because the brain remembers. What it does is, alcohol is so foreign to the brain, but the brain goes, hey, wait, that worked, because a part of the brain's job is to help us feel good, right? Another part of its job is to keep our lungs working and our heart beating and all these things, and so it goes, well, that was very efficient, and so it makes this little reward pathway for alcohol. So the next time that you're feeling stressed in that kind of way, the brain goes, oh, this worked, do this. And so that's what a craving feels like. We're not bad, we're not unintelligent. It's just that the brain formed a defective reward pathway because alcohol lied to the brain.
Why does alcohol affect people differently? Like my father was an angry alcoholic. My husband, when he used to drink, was a happy alcoholic.
Yeah. So I hear that. Congratulations, your husband's in recovery?
No, he still drinks, but he's never been an
Alcoholic.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, still congratulations, because moderation is hard to do.
Yeah.
Actually, alcohol is an anesthetic. I can do surgery on you if you drink enough drinks and pass out, because you won't feel it. So we go through these stages. So we feel buzzed, we feel warm, we feel fuzzy, and then we're the happy drunk, and then we start to get a little bit belligerent. And these are just the stages. So the belligerent person has had a little bit more alcohol in them, and then you pass out. And so if you're having surgery, your anesthesiologist is going to take you through that grumpy stage very quickly.
Yeah.
So they know how to do that. And so literally it's usually more alcohol, but also some of our emotions and stuff that we don't let out in normal life, alcohol inhibits that. And so, yeah, if you've got a lot of anger built up, that can also be let loose at that time.
So the alcohol lets it. You're less inhibited when you're drunk.
Yep.
Yeah,
You are less
that makes
inhibited.
sense. What happens in alcohol treatment?
I love alcohol treatment. So there's several routes into that. AA is great, or any kind of a community support group. There's Smart Recovery. If you've got a church group, I say join a knitting group, join anything. Do something where somebody's going to notice if you're not there the next week, and somebody's going to say, how are you doing? So now you've got a community support. Treatment has different levels, and you don't have to decide, do I need residential or do I need outpatient or do I need individual? Because you call the number on the back of your insurance card, they tell you who to call, you call them, they do a little intake interview, and they say, oh, it looks like you would benefit from residential or intensive outpatient. You don't have to remember all those different names, that's our job. But so there's group therapy about 12 hours a week, or there's individual about 1 hour a week.
Yeah, things are so different now from when I was a kid. Because when I was a kid, and because my father was the breadwinner, when we'd call the police, he wouldn't have to leave. We did.
Oh, to protect you, or?
No, there was no protection back then.
No, oh dear.
You know, back then there was nothing like we have now.
Okay.
You know, so we'd go to my grandparents or wherever.
To get
but
away.
He would be able to stay there.
Right, yeah.
And that's the best the police could do. Because it didn't look like he hurt anybody, but he did. So the police couldn't do anything.
And so their hands are tied, yeah. So that happens. So on those lines, I do get people who come to treatment for me because of legal problems, like you, by the way, you have to, the court ordered you to, or your probation officer wants you to. And they're not always happy to be there, so change doesn't happen the same way for a person in that situation. It's very hard to force somebody to change.
Back then there was a medication that my father was put on called antabuse.
Yes.
What kind of medications do they use for that now?
So there's still antabuse. That works by making you very, very sick if you drink.
I remember.
You remember, yeah. And there's, I can't say all of the right names right now, but baclofen is one. We kind of discovered that through the side door. I think it started out as a pain medication, and then we found out, well, it works really well for a couple of other things, by the way. It kind of helps with cravings. Some people do, this would be more for opiate recovery. Gabapentin just comforts you a little and helps you through those cravings. So there's no reason not to get on a medication that's going to help you. You're recovering from a very serious illness, so.
Well, he was forced because he did finally go to jail. He was forced to go on abuse.
Okay.
And he drank anyways.
So there are people that will do that, and they'll drink anyway and go ahead and get the vomiting over with. Now I can finish drinking.
Yeah.
The brain, the reward pathway is defective, remember. And
does alcohol affect the brain differently than drugs do? Or is it about the same, just a different level?
Good question. All of these different substances go to different receptors, so they make us feel a little bit different ways. But as far as the brain getting a defective reward pathway, it's pretty much all the same. If we put you in a PET scan and then give you cues like pictures or something to make you have a craving, we'll see the same spot light up for alcohol, cocaine, opiates.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does it mean to treat the whole person?
So it's the person's recovery. Like if you're in therapy with me, it's not my recovery, and I don't have the answers for you. And by the way, if I did, I'd be very rich. I'd write that book, and I'd sell that book, and I'd be rich. No, I don't have all the answers. So it's the person's recovery. Sometimes we can talk straight up about alcohol use and avoiding it, or sometimes we can talk about, by the way, how are things going with your grandkids? So the whole person, if you think of a wheel and each segment in the wheel is a different piece of your life, we can work on one segment and it will help the other segment.
And when a person goes in for treatment, does that treatment also reach out to the family?
The best treatment does. I always open it up to bring in a family member for a session or two. I don't try to do family therapy. There are some AA groups, they're called open groups, and what that means is that you don't have to have alcohol use disorder to go to anybody, family. There are a few family dynamics type groups that help teach that.
Like Al-Anon?
Al-Anon is a whole organization for that, and it's super, super important. And they have Alateen as well, which would have benefited you, right?
Yeah. And they did have that back then, but it wasn't to the grade it is now. Back then it was mostly people coming to complain, but not trying to change anything.
Yeah. So groups get a certain temperature, and so if you find yourself in an AA group or something and there's just a lot of complaining, just find another group. That's all.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Do community groups help?
Yeah, so they do. We need to come at this from several sides. We need to come at it through the front door, the side door, and the window to help the person. And so community support groups are very, very important. That's why Alcoholics Anonymous has been around for so long. The number one reason two reasons some people say they don't want to do AA is because there's a spiritual component. You kind of surrender yourself to a higher power.
Right.
And then there's some groups are complaining groups.
Yeah.
So find another group or find another program like Smart Recovery or something. Yeah, they absolutely help. I don't think you can get well unless you bring in a community. I asked one of my patients, like, what's been working the best for you? And he says, I told everybody that I'm done drinking and I'm in recovery, and now they won't let me have a drink.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Is there any group help in the area besides AA?
I wish there was. We're a relatively small community, and so if you're in a medical emergency detox from alcohol, meaning you're about to go into a seizure, you're having those hallucinations, those sweats, those shakes, you can detox in the hospital. That's a medical emergency. And then we lack those middle levels of care here, and then we have me with the intensive outpatient. Or no, I said that wrong. Me with just outpatient. For intensive outpatient, I always say you're going to head to Madison or Milwaukee. Rogers does a great job, Rogers Mental Health. And then Aurora Psychiatric has the Dewey Center. And then, there's places in Oconomowoc and stuff as well. Halfway houses are also helpful, but sometimes people are sent there because they're court-ordered and they're just not really committed yet.
Okay, well, I thank you so much for being here today. And
thank you.
If you have any information that you'd like to share that we can add to the website, we will add that later. So
Okay.
You can just email it to me.
Oh, I will do that. I'll
And-
send you some phone numbers and things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
very much. Welcome back to our second part. I'd like to introduce Emily Reich from...
I work with NAMI Southeast Wisconsin as a certified peer specialist.
What's NAMI?
NAMI is the National Alliance of Mental Illness,
Okay.
Which they have a contract with Jefferson County Human Services.
Okay.
So I am able to provide peer support to Jefferson County. I pretty recently just became the first peer specialist on Jefferson County's treatment court team.
Okay.
So that's kind of exciting and moving things in a cool direction, in my opinion.
So you're not just involved in alcohol, you're involved in drugs also?
Yeah, so-
I didn't mean you.
No, that's, but to get certified as a peer specialist, you have to have lived experience with either mental health and or substance abuse. So most people that struggle with substance abuse
Yeah.
typically have a underlying mental health issue, whether it's, as a result from their substance use or, so
Okay.
a lot of us qualify for both, but.
Okay. And I heard you started a new program. Can you tell us about that?
Well, so I started sober bowling out in Watertown about 3 years ago. And it was just like a monthly event to get people together, something fun to do with, with abstinence and being able to have fun in sobriety, recovery. However, as I became a member of the Jefferson County Drug-Free Coalition, they have been able to make it so that it's a free event now,
Okay.
which is really cool because it's been growing each month. We've averaged about 45 to 50 people that show up each month, and we do free shoe rental and then 2 free games on us. And if
Okay.
people want to stay and bowl more, it's at their expense. So.
And do you think the people have really appreciated?
Yes. I know, like, starting it was always kind of hit or miss how many people would show up, but it's been pretty consistent. And we meet at Watertown Bowl 18. I recently just switched the day and time because the leagues are done there, so we can start sooner. So it's going to be the second Saturday of the month throughout the summer, at least, starting at 7:30 p.m. And you can just show up and say you're with Sober Bowling, and they know us down there. So.
And how do you know that this person has?
So the only requirement I've
Yes.
ever asked was that the people that come just, respect individuals' sobriety, recovery. I've never really had to encounter anybody that came like totally under the influence of something.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a couple instances where after the fact people have mentioned to me that certain situations may have been a little triggering. There is a bar in the bowling alley, so there's people drinking.
So the bar's not closed during your?
Nope, it is not. Which, for me, being involved in recovery and somebody that, works a 12-step program, I've learned that triggers are going to happen in life. And, some of the people that have had some triggers during sober bowling, I've said, bring it up there. That's probably one of the safest places to experience a trigger when you're surrounded by a bunch of other sober people that can support you and help walk through it with you. So, there's that, but we haven't really had any issues.
Well, that's great.
Knock on wood.
Yeah. Well, Emmy from Jefferson Drug Coalition
Emmy
has
Reiner.
mentioned that you were thinking of other types of events too.
Yes, so I recently just met with another member of the coalition, and we're trying to brainstorm some ideas, some other sober events that we could have throughout Jefferson County. So if anybody has any ideas or suggestions, I'm totally open. It's, for me, living in Jefferson County, born and raised for most of my life, I recently just moved out to Oconomowoc last summer, but up until then, throughout the years, me trying to get sober, you know, I found that there's definitely a lack in
Support?
well, I don't want to say that, because there's support, but like for people that don't.
A lack of places to go that doesn't
Right.
involve alcohol.
Well, yes, and not only that, but like, you know, for some of the peers I work with that are in treatment court, so drug or alcohol court, they're required to go to like self-help meetings. And in Jefferson County, that's pretty limited to 12-step recovery, which would be AA, NA, CA, you know. And a lot of people, you know, whether it's their own resentments that they have or just, you know, anything really, like sometimes that doesn't work for everybody. So in any way that I can promote, you know, a positive life
Right.
change or,
Right.
or moving in a positive direction, because that's another thing I've learned getting certified as a peer specialist is that sobriety looks different to everybody, and that there are many pathways to recovery, to sobriety, you know, and I know like with Zoom and COVID and the whole virtual world opening up, like that's created a lot of other avenues for people to,
Right.
but you know, for
Still, the
treatment
per-
court people, some of them are required to do in-person meetings, and when, you know, it's just difficult to
Yeah.
try to get something like that started, you know. So, but we're trying. we're in the process.
What do you hope for the future of sober bowling?
Well, I hope that it continues to flourish, and you know, it's been really just. I was not expecting the type of turnout that we've had.
That's good.
You know, since it has been a free event, it's, you know, just getting the word out there. Anybody is welcome to come. You do not have to be working a 12-step program. You know, like I bring my kids with me every week, which the earlier start time is nicer with that because it gets to be a little late. But yeah, people bring their kids, their family, brothers, sisters, cousins, anybody is welcome to come, just as long as you respect people's sobriety and recovery.
Are you looking for more sponsors for sober bowling?
Well, we are always, yes, looking for more sponsors. At the start of it, the coalition tried to, you know, be able to provide like drinks and food, and that got to be pretty pricey. So, I mean, just to be able to have more options for people too, like, or maybe make it a bi-monthly thing, or, you know, something like that. There's also, someone started a sober bowling out in Jefferson that the coalition also pays for, provides finances for. However, the bowling alley just was sold, and so the new owner has agreed to let us continue, but the days they had sober bowling out there, it was dollar games, dollar shoe rental, dollar drinks, you know, it was very inexpensive for us to be able to do that. So we're kind of waiting. Hopefully that'll pick back up in June, and that'll be the first and third Wednesday of the month.
So it's once a month?
Watertown's is once a month.
Okay.
And Jefferson's, as of right now, it'll be the first and third Wednesday of the month at 6 p.m.
Well, Watertown Lodge, Elks Lodge 666, the drug awareness program, which I'm the chair of, would like to donate $1,500 to your program.
Wow, that's, I'm kind of speechless. That's gonna carry us a really long way, and I am truly, truly grateful. Yeah, and I'm sure, you know, our regulars that come every month will be very appreciative as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Anything else you'd like to say before we go?
I mean, if anybody has any questions or wants more info on the sober bowling, they can contact me. My number, should I say my number?
Yeah, go ahead, and it will be added at the end of the show also.
Okay. It is 262-894-0734. And also my buddy Trent has also been a contact person. I don't have his number memorized,
Well,
so
you
I'll
can
have
send
to
it to me.
add it. And I will not be at Sober Bowling in June because I'll be in Florida, but I have somebody running it, so
Lucky
I'm hoping
you.
it's a good turnout.
Well, thank you, Emily, for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
And we will see you next time on ICAN. Thank you for being here today.